Dr. Zixtel's crystalline appendages clinked softly against the medical scanner as they adjusted its settings for the 5th time. The readings couldn't be correct. According to the device, their patient's internal support structure had completely separated into 2 distinct pieces. Yet somehow, the human before them remained calm, even maintaining what their species called a smile. "I understand this might seem concerning," astronaut Sarah Chen said from her position on the examination table, "but I assure you, this is a fairly standard injury. A clean break, from what I can tell." The medical officer's upper sensor stalks wavered in disbelief. In their 300 years of practicing xenomedicine at the Central Medical Institute, they had never encountered such a peculiar response to catastrophic structural failure. Among their own people, the crystalline collective, any crack in their silicon-based framework meant permanent disability or worse. "Patient Chen," Dr. Zixtel began, their universal translator working to convey the appropriate level of gravity in their tone. "I don't believe you understand. Your primary load-bearing support beam, what you call a femur, has experienced complete structural failure. The integrity of your entire biological framework is compromised." Sarah shifted slightly on the examination table, wincing at the movement but maintaining her composure. "Yes, doctor. That's what we call a broken leg. I'll need a cast and about 6 to 8 weeks of recovery time, depending on how well it sets." The doctor's crystalline structure vibrated in confusion, creating a soft chiming sound that echoed through the examination room. "Sets." They consulted their translator implant, certain it must be malfunctioning. "Patient Chen, biological structures do not set. Once broken, they must be replaced with synthetic materials or prosthetic alternatives." A look of understanding dawned on Sarah's face. "Ah, I see the confusion. Doctor, human bones heal themselves. They're living tissue, constantly breaking down and rebuilding. When a break occurs, our bodies initiate a repair process." Dr. Zixtel's normally iridescent surface clouded to a pale milky white, the equivalent of a crystalline being becoming pale with shock. Their medical training had covered the bizarre nature of carbon-based life forms, but this defied all logical expectations. They quickly initiated a full biological scan, their sensor stalks whirring as they processed the data. "Impossible," they whispered, the word creating a melodic crystal chime. "Your internal scans show increased cellular activity around the break site. Are you experiencing some form of accelerated growth disorder?" Sarah couldn't help but laugh, though she quickly stopped when it jostled her injured leg. "No, doctor. That's just the normal healing process beginning. My body is already starting to repair the break. We'll need to make sure the bone is properly aligned so it heals correctly, but this is all perfectly normal for humans." The medical officer's surface rippled with conflicting color patterns, a sign of intense cognitive discomfort among their species. They quickly pressed a series of commands into their communication device, summoning their medical team. This case clearly required additional expertise and observation. As they waited for the team to arrive, Dr. Zixtel noticed something even more disturbing in the scan results. "Patient Chen, these readings indicate multiple sites of previous structural damage that show signs of repair." Their voice created a discordant note that caused the nearby instruments to vibrate slightly. "Oh yes," Sarah nodded casually. "I broke my arm climbing trees when I was 10. And there was that skiing accident in college. They all healed up fine. The arm's actually stronger at the break site now." The medical team arrived just in time to witness their chief medical officer's crystalline form emit a high-pitched resonance of pure scientific distress. As they watched their superior's usually composed form flicker through a rainbow of shocked color patterns, Sarah realized this might be a longer hospital stay than she'd initially anticipated. 3 days into what Dr. Zixtel had begun referring to as the human structural anomaly, their private research chamber had transformed into a chaotic array of scanning equipment and holographic displays. Each screen showed a different view of Sarah Chen's fractured femur, capturing what the medical officer could only describe as biological impossibility in real time. Computer, magnification factor 12. They chimed, their crystalline form reflecting rainbow patterns across the medical bay's sterile walls. The holographic display zoomed in, revealing a microscopic dance of cellular activity that defied everything they had learned in 3 centuries of medical practice. Tiny biological units, osteoblasts, according to human medical texts, were moving with clear purpose across the fracture site, rather than causing further deterioration. As any sensible injury should, these cells appeared to be constructing microscopic bridges across the gap. Medical log, Day 3. Dr. Zixtal recorded, their voice creating harmonic overtones of scientific distress. The human patient's cellular response continues to defy standard medical protocols. Rather than accepting their structural failure, the patient's internal framework appears to be rebuilding itself. A soft knock interrupted their recording. Sarah Chen had arrived for her follow-up examination, maneuvering skillfully with her temporary mobility assistance devices, crutches, as she called them. "Good morning, doctor," she greeted cheerfully. "How are those scans looking?" Dr. Zixtal's surface rippled with concerned color patterns. "Patient Chen, I've spent the last 6 hours recalibrating every piece of equipment in this facility. Either every scanner we possess has simultaneously malfunctioned, or your skeletal structure is actively reconstructing itself at the molecular level." Sarah smiled as she carefully settled onto the examination table. "That's exactly what it's supposed to do. The cast keeps everything aligned while the bone knits itself back together." The doctor's crystalline appendages clinked against each other in agitation. "Knits. Patient Chen, structural materials do not knit. They can be fused, replaced, or reinforced, but biological matter cannot simply regenerate. Actually," Sarah reached for her personal device, "I brought some human medical references that might help explain the process. Would you like to see them?" The next hour became a crash course in human cellular biology that left Dr. Zixtal's usually orderly research notes in complete disarray. They learned that not only did human bones contain living cells, but these cells were constantly breaking down and rebuilding their skeletal structure throughout their entire lives. "And you say this process begins before birth?" they asked, their translator struggling to convey their mix of horror and fascination. "Oh yes," Sarah nodded. "Our bones start as cartilage and gradually ossify as we develop. They continue growing and changing until we reach adulthood." Dr. Zixtal's surface briefly shifted to a deep indigo, the crystalline equivalent of a stunned silence. The concept of a constantly changing skeletal structure went against everything they understood about biological support systems. Among their people, one's crystalline framework was set at emergence and remained unchanged until final fragmentation. "Patient Chen," they finally managed, their voice creating a gentle chime of realization. "Are you telling me that your entire species possesses this capability? This isn't some unique trait specific to you?" "Nope, we all do it. Though some people heal faster than others, and it generally slows down as we age," Sarah explained, then added with a slight grin, "Wait until I tell you about how human children lose their first set of teeth." The medical bay's instruments recorded the exact frequency of Dr. Zixtal's shocked resonance, a sound that would later be described in their research papers as the moment crystalline medicine changed forever. As their color patterns cycled through shades of scientific confusion, they realized this case would require something they had never needed before: a complete revaluation of what they considered medically possible. The Central Medical Institute's emergency containment sirens wailed through previously peaceful corridors, their piercing tone sending staff members scrambling for safety protocols. At the heart of this chaos stood Dr. Zixtal's examination room, now sealed behind shimmering quarantine fields, their crystalline form pulsing with alarmed frequencies. "Containment Team Beta to Medical Bay 7. The station's AI announced in multiple languages. Level 3 biological containment protocols now in effect." Inside the sealed room, Sarah Chen sat on her examination table, surrounded by a growing crowd of concerned alien medical professionals in iridescent containment suits. She watched with a mixture of amusement and exasperation as they huddled around Dr. Zixtal's latest scan results. As you can see, Dr. Zixtal explained to their colleagues, their voice creating stressed harmonics that made the quarantine field ripple. The patient's skeletal structure is being invaded by some form of aggressive growth. These biological entities are literally building new material within the fracture site. The junior medical officer's crystalline form shifted to a pale green of concern. Could it be some form of parasitic infection? Perhaps a bone-eating organism that mimics repair to hide its presence? Actually, Sarah raised her hand, trying to get their attention. If you'll just let me explain. Containment team, prepare isolation protocols. Another doctor chimed in, their surface flickering with worried patterns. We need to study this growth pattern before it spreads to other patients. The room's atmospheric sensors picked up additional crystalline life forms arriving outside the quarantine field. Sarah could see their shapes refracting through the barrier, their forms displaying various colors of medical concern. Everyone, please, she tried again, louder this time. This is completely normal for humans. Our bones are living tissue. The phrase living tissue created such a discordant resonance among the assembled medical team that several nearby scanning devices automatically recalibrated themselves. Dr. Zixtal's surface briefly displayed all known colors of shock simultaneously. Patient Chen, they managed to harmonize after a moment. Are you suggesting that your support structure is alive? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Our bones aren't just structural supports. They're living organs. They contain blood vessels, nerves, and cells that constantly rebuild and repair them. The medical team's collective resonance reached a frequency that made the quarantine field's energy patterns fluctuate. A senior specialist had to be led from the room when Sarah mentioned that human bone marrow actively produces blood cells. Perhaps, Dr. Zixtal suggested, their voice creating uncertain harmonics. You could explain this process in more detail. For scientific purposes, of course, not because we're all experiencing professional crisis. Sarah nodded, carefully shifting to a more comfortable position. Well, when a bone breaks, the first thing that happens is the formation of a blood clot around the break site. Then special cells called osteoblasts begin creating new bone tissue. As she continued her impromptu lecture on human bone healing, the containment team's color patterns gradually shifted from panic to fascination. Dr. Zixtal began taking such detailed notes that their crystalline data storage started emitting a faint glow from information density. And you're saying, one particularly brave resident asked, that this process happens automatically, without any external technological intervention. Completely natural, Sarah confirmed. Though we do need to make sure the bones are properly aligned, which is why we use casts and sometimes surgical pins. The mention of surgical pins, the concept of deliberately inserting foreign objects into living bone, caused 3 more medical officers to excuse themselves for emergency meditation sessions. Dr. Zixtal, however, had begun to display the iridescent patterns of scientific breakthrough. Patient Chen. They chimed softly, their resonance creating patterns of wonder in the quarantine field. I believe you may have just revolutionized our understanding of biological repair systems. Though, they added as their surface rippled with lingering concern, I still think we should maintain quarantine until we fully understand why your skeleton is alive. Dr. Zixtal's research chamber had transformed into what their colleagues now called the Human Bone Archive. Holographic displays covered every available surface, showing everything from ancient Egyptian medical papyri to modern radiological scans. Their crystalline form shifted through various shades of concentration as they absorbed centuries of human medical history. Medical log, supplemental. They chimed softly, their voice creating ripples in the holographic images. The more I study human skeletal regeneration, the more impossible it seems. Yet the evidence spans their entire recorded history. The display before them showed a particularly fascinating case, a prehistoric human femur that had broken and healed completely, dated to over 15,000 years ago. The bone had not only repaired itself but had grown stronger at the break site, a phenomenon their patient called bone remodeling. Computer, display comparative analysis. Medieval combat injuries. Dr. Zixtal commanded. The hologram shifted, showing a series of healed fractures from human warriors. Their surface rippled with amazement as they observed multiple healed injuries in single specimens. Some individuals had survived and recovered from dozens of broken bones throughout their lives. A gentle, alert tone interrupted their research. "Doctor," the station's AI announced, "your requested historical data from the Human Sports Medicine Archive has been processed." "Display," they chimed, their anticipation creating harmonic overtones in the chamber. New images filled the room. Athletes with multiple healed fractures returning to peak performance, skeletal scans showing the progressive healing of complex breaks, and detailed documentation of recovery times. The doctor's crystalline structure vibrated with scientific confusion as they observed humans casually discussing their previous breaks as minor inconveniences. Computer, access pediatric growth records. The doctor's request brought up a new set of scans that caused their surface to cloud with disbelief. The images showed human skeletal structures actively growing and changing from infancy through adolescence. Their normally melodious voice created discordant notes of shock as they watched bones literally lengthening and reshaping themselves over time. "This can't be correct," they harmonized anxiously. "Computer, verify data integrity." "Data verified," the AI responded. "All scans show normal human developmental patterns." Dr. Zixtal's form briefly flickered through all known shades of scientific distress. Among their people, the concept of a constantly changing support structure was not just impossible, it was terrifying. Their own crystalline frameworks were formed at emergence and remained unchanged until final fragmentation. The idea of bones that could grow, reshape, and repair themselves challenged everything they understood about biological engineering. A message notification pulsed on their communication terminal. Sarah had sent additional references about human bone development, including something called growth plates. The doctor's surface shifted to a deep indigo of concentration as they began studying these specialized zones of bone formation. Medical log, addendum, they recorded, their voice creating complex harmonics of revelation. Human skeletal structures appear to be in a constant state of flux. Their support framework is not merely a static structure, but a dynamic, living system capable of adaptation and repair. The implications for medical science are overwhelming. They paused the recording as a new thought sent alarming resonances through their crystalline form. If human bones could achieve this level of self-repair, what other regenerative capabilities might their species possess? The doctor quickly began accessing data about human soft tissue healing, their color patterns cycling through shades of scientific fascination. The chamber's sensors registered a slight harmonic tremor as Dr. Zixtal discovered their first reference to human liver regeneration. Their subsequent resonance of shock was later described by the station's maintenance staff as similar to the sound of 1,000 crystal glasses singing in perfect harmony. As the doctor's research continued deep into the station's night cycle, their colleagues could hear faint, amazed chiming sounds echoing through the medical bay. The Human Bone Archive had become more than a research project. It was becoming a revolution in xenomedicine, one impossible healing process at a time. The Central Medical Institute's grand amphitheater sparkled with the assembled forms of over 300 crystalline medical professionals. Their surfaces reflected the soft ambient light in a dazzling array of professional colors, creating an atmosphere that humans might have compared to being inside a living kaleidoscope. Sarah Chen stood at the presentation podium, her newly healed leg bearing her weight with confidence. Dr. Zixtal hovered nearby, their crystalline form displaying swirling patterns of scientific anticipation as they prepared to moderate what would become one of the most memorable medical presentations in galactic history. Distinguished colleagues, Dr. Zixtel's voice chimed through the chamber, creating harmonious resonances with the crystalline architecture. We are gathered today to discuss a revolutionary discovery in biological regeneration. Patient Chen has graciously agreed to share insights into human skeletal repair processes. The holographic display activated, showing a three-dimensional image of Sarah's healing femur, tracked over the past 6 weeks. The assembled medical professionals leaned forward, their surfaces shifting through various shades of interest. As you can observe, Sarah began, gesturing to the display. Human bones undergo a complex healing process when injured. What you're seeing is not an anomaly or a medical intervention. This is our natural healing response. A ripple of discordant tones swept through the audience. A senior medical officer from the outer colonies raised their appendage, their surface displaying patterns of skepticism. Are we to understand that this regenerative process is standard among your species? Actually, Sarah smiled, advancing to the next slide. Bone healing is just one example of human regenerative capabilities. Let me show you something even more interesting. The display shifted to show a time-lapse of human skin healing after a cut. The amphitheater erupted in a cascade of crystalline chimes as the assembled doctors watched new tissue form and seal a wound. Several junior residents had to excuse themselves when Sarah explained that this process happened without any external technological assistance. But wait, she continued, her enthusiasm growing. There's more. Our liver can regenerate up to 25% of its mass if damaged. Our muscles repair and strengthen themselves after injury. Even our nervous system has limited regenerative capabilities. The frequency of shocked resonances from the audience reached such a pitch that the amphitheater's harmonic dampeners had to activate. Dr. Zixtel quickly moved to stabilize a colleague whose color patterns had become dangerously chaotic with scientific distress. And perhaps most remarkably, Sarah added, seemingly unaware of the growing crisis she was creating among the crystalline medical community, this healing process begins before we're even born. Human embryonic development is essentially one long sequence of cellular growth and transformation. The holographic display showed a sequence of human fetal development. The sound of 300 crystalline beings trying to process the concept of a constantly changing skeletal structure created a symphony of confused harmonics that would be talked about in medical circles for years to come. A brave cynobiologist from the inner rings managed to harmonize a question. Patient Chen, are you suggesting that human bodies are in a constant state of cellular renewal? Exactly. Sarah beamed. In fact, every cell in our body is replaced over time. Different tissues have different renewal rates, but we're essentially rebuilding ourselves constantly at the cellular level. Dr. Zixtel's surface briefly displayed all known colors of amazement as they watched their colleagues attempt to process this information. Their own recent research had prepared them for these revelations, but seeing the collective reaction of the galactic medical community was something else entirely. I believe, they chimed softly to Sarah as another group of overwhelmed doctors excused themselves for emergency meditation. We may need to schedule several follow-up conferences. Though perhaps, they added as the harmonic dampeners struggled to contain the audience's resonant frequencies of shock. We should give them time to process the concept of living bones before we mention human pregnancy. The research laboratory had transformed over the past few weeks. Holographic displays now shared space with traditional crystalline data structures, creating an unusual blend of human and galactic medical technology. Dr. Zixtel moved between workstations with newfound purpose, their surface displaying the iridescent patterns of scientific breakthrough. Begin comparative analysis. Trial 27. They chimed, their resonance steady with growing confidence. The scanner hummed to life, projecting parallel images of healing processes, a human bone knitting itself together alongside a carefully cultivated crystal matrix. Sarah watched from her observation post, now serving as an official consultant to the xenomedicine department. Her fully healed femur had become something of a celebrity among the medical staff, with junior residents often requesting scans for their research projects. The key, Dr. Zixtel explained to their assembled research team, lies not in replicating human healing exactly, but in understanding the fundamental principles. Their surface rippled with patterns of excitement as they manipulated the crystal matrix controls. Observe. The experimental chamber pulsed with carefully calibrated energy. Inside, a damaged crystal specimen began exhibiting unprecedented behavior. Microscopic crystalline structures were forming along the fracture lines, creating bridges between the separated sections. By studying human osteoblasts, the doctor continued, their voice creating harmonics of triumph, we've developed a method to stimulate similar behavior in crystalline matrices. The crystal doesn't truly grow as human bone does, but it can be guided to form new structural connections. But junior researchers' surface flickered with patterns of realization. Like scaffold building, they chimed softly, using the human construction analogy that had become popular among the medical staff. Precisely. Dr. Zixtel's form brightened with approval. We're not healing in the human sense, but we're achieving something remarkably similar. Computer, display microscopic comparison. A holographic display expanded, showing the intricate dance of human bone cells alongside the newly developed crystal formation process. The patterns were different, but the end result was beginning to look remarkably similar. Sarah leaned forward, fascinated by the parallel healing processes. It's amazing how studying one species' natural abilities can inspire solutions for another, she observed. Though I notice you still flinch slightly when I mention growing pains. Dr. Zixtel's surface briefly flickered with remembered shock. Some concepts remain challenging, they admitted, their resonance creating gentle harmonics of amusement. However, our understanding of biological adaptability has expanded tremendously. The research team turned their attention to a new series of test results. The latest trials showed promising developments in rapid crystal reconstruction, a process that could potentially revolutionize medical treatment for crystalline life forms throughout the galaxy. What fascinates me most, Dr. Zixtel mused, their voice creating thoughtful harmonics, is how your species simply accepted these healing capabilities as normal. You grew up expecting your bodies to repair themselves. Sarah nodded, smiling. Just as your people grew up understanding the perfect stability of your crystalline forms. Different evolutionary paths, different solutions to survival. A soft alert tone interrupted their discussion. The latest trial results were ready for analysis, and they showed something unprecedented. The crystal matrix had not only formed new connections, but had integrated them in a way that strengthened the entire structure. Just like a healed bone, Sarah remarked, recognizing the similarity to human bone remodeling. Dr. Zixtel's surface displayed complex patterns of scientific satisfaction. Their initial panic over human healing had transformed into something far more valuable. A deep appreciation for the diversity of biological solutions across the galaxy. Perhaps, they chimed softly, their resonance creating ripples in the holographic displays. The most important discovery isn't the healing process itself, but the reminder that impossible is often just another word for unexplored. They paused, their surface shifting to a subtle shade of curiosity. Though I still have questions about this concept you call growing pains. The Central Medical Institute's quarterly journal had never seen such high download rates. Dr. Zixtel's preliminary paper on human regenerative capabilities, titled Dynamic Biological Reconstruction, Lessons from Human Skeletal Repair, had crashed the Galactic Medical Database 3 times in its first day of publication. Another research request from the Pleiadian Medical Academy, the Institute's AI announced, adding to the growing list of messages flooding the doctor's communication terminal. Their surface rippled with pleased patterns as they processed the latest statistics. The holographic news feed spanning the medical bay displayed headlines from across known space. Revolutionary human healing study challenges medical paradigms, self-repairing beings. The truth about human biology and crystal medicine transformed. New hope for structural repair. Dr. Sixtel stood in their office, watching research vessels from a dozen different species dock at the station. Each brought teams of medical experts eager to study what they now called the human healing phenomenon. Their surface displayed subtle patterns of amusement as they recalled their own initial panic over Sarah's broken femur. "Doctor," a young crystalline researcher chimed from the doorway, their form vibrating with excitement. "The Andromedans have successfully replicated your crystal matrix regeneration technique. They're reporting a 60% reduction in permanent structural damage cases." The news created pleased harmonics throughout the office. What had begun as a single case study was rapidly transforming medical treatment across the galaxy. Research stations from the core worlds to the outer rings were adapting the principles of human healing to their own biological frameworks. A soft alert tone indicated an incoming transmission from Earth's Medical Council. More human volunteers were offering to participate in research studies, eager to help advance galactic medicine. Dr. Sixtel's surface shifted to patterns of gratitude as they remembered Sarah's patience during those first chaotic days. "Begin recording," they chimed, their voice creating ripples in the holographic displays. "Update to Xenomedicine database. The study of human healing mechanisms continues to yield unexpected benefits. The Centaurian biomechanics team reports successful adaptation of bone-knitting principles to their silicon-based life support systems. The Rigelian Medical Corps has developed new treatments for crystalline fractures based on human cellular repair patterns." They paused, their surface displaying thoughtful colors as they considered the broader implications. "Most significantly, our understanding of biological adaptability has expanded beyond all previous limitations. What we once considered fixed constants in medicine are now recognized as simply one point on a spectrum of possible solutions." The recording was interrupted by another excited researcher, their form barely maintaining professional composure. "Doctor, the latest scans from the Pediatric Research Division. You need to see this." The holographic display filled with images from a human children's hospital. The crystalline medical team had finally gathered enough data to create a time-lapse visualization of human growth from infancy to adulthood. The resulting display showed bones lengthening, reshaping, and strengthening in real time. "Remarkable," Dr. Sixtel chimed softly, their surface showing complex patterns of scientific wonder. "To think we once considered this process alarming rather than inspiring." Their reflection was interrupted by the station's priority message from the Galactic Medical Council. "They're requesting your presence at next month's symposium on regenerative medicine. The Council is considering establishing a new research division dedicated to adaptive healing techniques." Dr. Sixtel's form brightened with professional satisfaction. The panic over Sarah's living bones had evolved into something far more significant, a fundamental shift in how the galaxy understood biological repair. A final alert caught their attention. A message from Sarah, now back on Earth but still consulting with the research team. She had attached an image of her young nephew's first lost tooth, along with a playful warning. "Wait until the Council hears about this one." The doctor's resulting resonance of amused disbelief created harmonic patterns that made the entire medical bay chime in sympathy. 6 months had passed since Sarah Chen first arrived at the Central Medical Institute with what Dr. Sixtel had initially diagnosed as catastrophic structural failure. Now she sat on the examination table for her final checkup, watching the doctor's crystalline form display subtle patterns of satisfaction as they reviewed her latest scans. "Remarkable," they chimed, their voice creating pleased harmonics that made the medical equipment hum in sympathy. "The bone density at the healed site is actually 12% higher than the surrounding tissue. Your body didn't just repair the break, it reinforced it." Sarah flexed her leg, smiling at how natural the movement felt. "That's pretty common with properly healed breaks. The body tends to over-engineer its repairs, just to be safe." The doctor's surface rippled with thoughtful colors as they compared the current scan to the original injury images. The difference was striking. Where there had once been a clean break, there was now seamless continuation of bone structure, with only slightly denser tissue marking the healing site. "You know," Sarah added, "I never thought my broken leg would lead to a revolution in galactic medicine. Though I have to admit, watching the medical conference's reaction to human healing was pretty entertaining." Dr. Zixtel's form briefly flickered with remembered amusement. "Indeed. 3 of my colleagues are still attending weekly meditation sessions to process the concept of living bones. Though I'm pleased to report that our crystal matrix regeneration research has now been successfully implemented in 27 major medical facilities." The examination room had changed over the months. Alongside traditional crystalline medical equipment, new hybrid devices incorporated principles learned from studying human biology. The doctor moved between them with practiced ease, their initial fear of biological change replaced by deep scientific curiosity. "I received an interesting message from my sister this morning," Sarah mentioned casually as the doctor completed their final measurements. "My niece just lost her first baby tooth. Would you like to see a picture?" The doctor's surface briefly clouded with professional distress, but their voice remained steady. "Ah yes, the human deciduous teeth replacement process. We've actually begun a comparative study between that and crystalline phase transitions. Though I must admit, the concept still causes some resonant disturbance among our pediatric specialists." A soft alert tone interrupted them. The final strength tests were complete, showing that Sarah's healed femur was now functioning at 105% of its original capacity. Dr. Zixtel's form displayed complex patterns of scientific satisfaction as they recorded the results. "You know," they chimed thoughtfully, "when you first arrived, I was convinced your injury would require extensive prosthetic replacement. Now, we're using principles derived from your healing process to develop new treatments for crystalline life forms across the galaxy." Sarah hopped off the examination table, deliberately demonstrating her fully restored mobility. Sometimes the best discoveries come from the most unexpected places. Though I hope your next breakthrough doesn't require anyone breaking any bones. The doctor's surface showed patterns of agreement as they prepared the final discharge documentation. The Galactic Medical Council has approved funding for a permanent human biology research division. We're particularly interested in studying something called muscle memory, though several council members needed reassurance that it doesn't involve actual crystal formation in human tissue. As Sarah prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "You've come a long way from sounding the containment alarm over my aggressive bone growth, Doctor. Think you're ready to learn about how human fingernails grow continuously." Dr. Zixtel's resulting resonance of surprise created such complex harmonics that 3 nearby scanners automatically recalibrated themselves. Their surface displayed a rapid sequence of colors before settling into the iridescent patterns of scientific curiosity that had become their normal state over the past 6 months. "Perhaps," they chimed, their voice creating amused overtones, "we should schedule that discussion for after the holiday season. The medical staff is still recovering from learning about human hair growth, and I believe they deserve some time to stabilize their resonance patterns before we introduce any new biological revelations."